All right. So I think we could probably get started now. I think we've got everybody here that I expect. Like I said before, Karen Mullins is on vacation, so I don't anticipate her logging in from wherever she's at. So with the select board appointing the school building committee last night and trying to be respectful of all the different roles that everybody here plays, I just wanted to get to the point where I think at our last meeting when we did the walkthrough, and Mike Cronin provided some examples of where certain size buildings and the footprint could lay and how it could lay within the boundary on the same side of the Vinebrook that the high school currently is, while doing new construction, leaving the current school in the location where it is, and then having to replicate fields afterwards. I really think that at this point we could probably wrap up the work of this working group and turn a recommendation over to the school building committee and just let them take it from here and move it forward. And so I just took a stab at drafting a motion that we could pass if the working group was so inclined, as far as making a recommendation to the school building committee. And for those of you that weren't on when I was first talking a little bit about, I do have all of the different iterations that Mike Cronin had provided, so that we could take a look at when we did the walkthrough. Some of the things that Mike Cronin had provided were 3- and 4-story buildings, and I think it was Doug Vicente who had asked, what would some 1-story or 2-story buildings look like? How much bigger of a footprint would that be? And so Mike did provide those to me, and I don't think anybody has seen those. And so if people want to take a look at those, I'm happy to share a screen and put those up on the screen. So David, you had a question?
Just a quick recap on what you just said about the conclusion about available space. Just wanted to, did I hear it correctly that that applied to leaving the existing school in place while we built the new building, so that there's no concern about where do we put the students? Is that correct?
That's correct, yeah.
Thank you.
And I think that's and Mike, you've done a number of school buildings, and Dr. Hackett has as well. And I've been involved in about 4 or 5 that have been funded by MSBA, some that were funded locally. And in all of those cases, we left the students in place, built around the school, then tore the old school down and did playgrounds, parking lots, and other things around that. I think Mike, do you have, you've got different experiences, I'm sure.
So in Newton, we built 2 high schools, one of which was an add renovation to an existing operating high school, and the other one was an idea similar to here, where we had one high school that was operating on one side of the property, and on the other side of the property, we built a new building, eliminating all play fields and all parking on the site for that window. So a little bit of both.
Doug.
Thanks, Jim. I just want to back up a couple inches. I will admit I was, I think I had COVID brain the last meeting because I was still recovering. So I want to make sure I didn't miss something, because it was not a typical meeting, because we all didn't really sit around and talk about what we saw, and people came and left in different times. So I just want to make sure that this is truly the concept of a recommendation of the group before, you know, my personal opinion is if that's workable, that's wonderful. If it's not quite sitting well with everybody, I'd love to hear that. And I know we just formed the committee last night to build it, but I think the issues in this group setting is a little different, because if we have to do some Article 97 type of issues or anything like that, I think that's what the purpose of this group was, to get everybody on the same page with who, what, where, when, why, and how. So, I mean, I'm fine with the conclusion you've come to myself, but I also want to be respectful of everybody else in the room and understand where they were coming from, because granted, we walked around and we looked, and it sounded, you know, feasible, but I'm not 100% sure we have all the information we would need to make a solid conclusion, and maybe others do, but that's sort of where my head is at right now. And I don't want anyone to have any more unnecessary meetings. That's not one of my goals in life, but I also want to make sure we were getting consensus amongst the stakeholders here that you know, that's a plan for it. So anyway, that's where I'm at. I'm not sort of trying to derail anything or extend anything, but I just wanted to be frank with what was going on in my head today.
Yep, that's good. And definitely we want to make sure everybody's comfortable with that direction. So I think David, you and the mic.
Yes, if I may, I support what was just concluded as what would be the best solution. Two quick questions. Might we see one graphic that shows by the blocks what you're proposing as far as the placement of the new school, which would show the old school, the parking that's in place, and your proposed layout area if necessary? And the second question, which is a horror question, can we be 99.9% that MSBA is going to go for replacement and not renovation?
Yeah, I don't think we can ever be sure of that, but I know projects I've sat in on, the replacement cost has always been just about the same as renovation. And when you look at the cost and benefit, MSBA usually goes with the replacement, especially if the local community is supporting that option.
Great to hear. Thank you.
And again, Mike and Julie have gone through the process probably more than I have, so their opinion would. Mike, you got your hand up.
I'm going to steal Doug's sentence there. I'm going to back up a few inches. Remember what this group was here for. We were here just to do a litmus test to see whether or not a school building could be built on another portion of that parcel of land. We are not telling the MSBA anything. All we're doing was giving ourselves some level of confidence that it could be done. What will happen is part of the feasibility study, the MSBA is going to go through an exhaustive assessment of all the properties that are available to the town of Lexington to build a high school, and then make their recommendations. They'll work with the town, of course, but they'll make their recommendations as to what they believe will be the best fit for the community. It may be an addition plus a renovation of the existing building. It also could be a new building on the other part of the parcel. So just because we've come to that conclusion really doesn't mean beans. What we're really going to do is go through the process with them, understanding that it could happen. I think we've proven to ourselves that it could, but there's no concrete evidence of anything that the MSBA has agreed to. I don't want to give David any bit of misinformation on that.
And when it comes to Article 97, where'd I go? There I am. When it comes to Article 97, we will be required for any acreage that we take out to put in a similar amount of acreage back into protected space. And so if we take out 5 acres because we need to build on them, we have to set aside 5 additional acres. And that'll be, I think that'll mostly be dictated by survey and engineers, because it's going to have to be similar type of land as well. We can't take 5 acres of upland and say, okay, the swamp that's in the middle of the school, that's part of the 5 acres that is going to be put back into Article 97. They won't buy that. And so, Kathleen, I'm going to, just because David had asked, I'm going to start off with sharing a screen of the engineering department did put together the exact location of where the Vine Brook is so that people can see that. So Kathleen, go ahead. And I'll
just to expand a little bit on what Mike said, I mean, we really are just at the beginning of this process. And I'm sure many people have had that experience where on a much smaller scale, they're doing a home renovation and you think you're going to do X, Y, or Z. And then once you start getting into it, problems come up, so maybe what you originally thought you were going to do is not actually what ultimately happens because of a variety of factors. So I just think we need to, just remember that, again, we are at the beginning and the feasibility study will dictate a lot of what we're doing, and just to keep that little bit of uncertainty in the back of our minds.
Yeah. So unfortunately, this is kind of a washed out looking plan, but right where the little hand is here, is where the Vinebrook goes. It goes along here. You can see there's a light tan line. Sooner, it would have been helpful if it was like a blue line or a red line or something, but it goes along right here.
Got
And
it.
that's where the Vinebrook goes through the property. And then if you look at, there's a, it comes down right through here and then cuts right through the middle of the outfield and comes out right here. So it follows that right there and then comes across, goes back over here. So
Jim, this is Dave. I know Karen's not here, but I also think there's an offset. And I don't know if it's 100 feet, 200 feet, whatever it is, from the culvert itself.
okay,
So that just has to be factored in. And the only concern that I have is with it still being an active recreation site, we're going to have discussions on project limits, lay down areas and things like that. I think that go beyond the group that's being created. So because there's a lot more players that are involved there. So we're just going to need to have those discussions.
yeah, and it would all have to be fenced off, the whole construction. So,
No, I agree, but we got to look at areas feasible, not feasible to do those things. So I think that's what we're going to have to wrap our hands around that. So.
yeah. Susie?
Thank you, Jim. So I apologize for joining a few minutes late. I just have one question and then some comments about the email you sent today. Was this posted on the town website so people could access? Because I only see that we have one person as an attendee.
No, it was not. As a working group, it hasn't.
No, we've been doing that and we committed
right.
to letting the community know when these meetings were happening. So somehow that ball got dropped and I think that's unfortunate. And I will say, I don't want to see that happen going forward. And I'll make my comments about why I don't feel this group should be disbanded. At the select board level, and I'm going to assume at the school committee level and at the recreation level and conservation level, we've all heard the importance of all the stakeholders being involved. And I think that's important as this process continues to move forward. In terms of Mike's comment that we were formed to do a litmus test about where this could build, that wasn't the sole reason why this group was formed. This group was formed to bring the stakeholders together to make sure that we could identify what the needs are now and what the needs are moving forward. And I'm absolutely taken aback / floored that you did not raise this last night at the select board meeting when we were talking about the school committee building, or the school building committee, and saying that this committee was going to be going away. So, I would like to have at least a minimum of a larger conversation with my colleagues on the select board to see if they think that's warranted. I don't personally. I also feel that as this project moves forward, and if we need to bring something to town meeting, that those of us who are elected officials or appointed officials, from the select board, the school committee, the recreation committee, that we, it's our job to take this to town meeting and to sell it to town meeting. And to get them behind us on it. And while we'd like to think, yes, they're going to be 100% behind us, it also takes some leadership in that capacity. And that's part of what I think some of us signed up for in this role, is to help get that land swap to take place. So I'm not in favor of disbanding this group at this time. Thank you.
Okay. Rick?
Good afternoon. A lot of my comments mirror what Susie Barry had to say. So rather than belabor the point, let me just suggest that every process has an expansion to it. You're suggesting you take the next step. And I think the suggestion is that other stakeholders be included in one way or another, whether as a continuation of the working group or as an add-on to the building committee. It's just kind of simple in a way.
Okay.
It speaks to inclusion. Recreation is a major stakeholder here. Thank you.
Okay. So, anyway, so here are, Mike, do you want me to run through some of these alternatives, and then we'll hear from Deepika as well.
Sure.
These are still the, no, these are 1- and 2-story options that you'd sent recently. you want me to run through them, or I mean,
Either way, I can do it. So what we really had done was taken a 100,000 square foot footprint that we GIS'd out just to make sure that it's pretty accurate. And then we overlaid it onto the property, trying to maintain staying to the right of the culvert. And there's a little plot of land over here that has a deed restriction on it that should be used for recreational purposes and not for educational purposes. So kind of trying to keep those little pieces in mind. We came up with about 400,000 square feet of academic space. We're estimating that as part of the process that we go through MSBA and the SBC will really determine what that number is. This is just a rough number that I'm using as a guideline. It could be less than that. It could be more than that. I'm just using that as a figure. So we put 3 footprints down, 2 single-story structures, and then a 2-story structure in the back, just to show that positionally it could fit on that side of the property while maintaining the school in operation. And on that piece of parcel that has the deed restriction, we put 2 recreational type buildings on that property. So I kind of said, okay, the field house could fit on that, and or if the community thought that it was warranted, a pool could fit on that property. So this kind of showed where the high school could fit technically on that property with 1- and 2-story buildings.
Mike, could I ask you to just point out that special area that has restriction again? I missed
So
the head.
Jim, on that previous.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's
just
right.
Okay.
here.
Thank you.
So we tried to stay respectful of that boundary right there that kind of runs, from 1 o'clock to 7 o'clock on that line there. And we're pretty close to doing that by maintaining everything on the right side of that. Or the east side of that would be academic space, and on the west side of that would be potentially recreation type structures. We could also do it without that, but we were just trying to just show as an example.
If it were
Appreciate
1
that.
and 2, yeah, if it were 1- and 2-story buildings, what it would look like. And then there were some other layouts like these that Mike had also sent over. That
Gotcha.
basically are all the same thing. It's just putting together 400,000 square foot footprints. Then here's what it would look like if you had 2 sections that were 200,000 square feet. And another option. And then that's still 2 stories. And then these were the taller buildings that Mike had initially shown us, these 3 options. Which you can
And
see.
all of these avoid the Vinebrook?
This one does not. But
This is one of the first versions before we determined that property would need to be avoided.
all of the rest of the Vinebrook comes down through about here and then through this field here.
And if I might, Jim, as the instigator of having to do this, could you just give a few words or arrow pointings for what matching land would be contemplated at this point to make up for whatever is the acreage that needed to be affected, and using valid ground for that purpose?
So Mike had put together this as one of the optional things. I don't know if all of them showed it. No, just this
Okay.
one. That showed here's a baseball diamond, here's a baseball diamond, here's a field, and here's a field.
Super. And what about the layout areas, if I may quit with that?
So if it were me kind of looking at the site, I'm looking as far left as possible that we have available to us, and potentially parking lots. So it'll depend on what the final layout of the building looks like, David, to be honest with you, to kind of figure out the geometries of where the laydown spaces that will be left over. That little baseball field at the top could also be on the park drive, could also be part of this process. Until we know kind of what that building will look like, we'll then be able to spill into where the trailers will need to be for the offices, and then where the laydown will be for things like steel and material and topsoil.
Thank you.
We're going to strip a lot of material off of this property.
Good enough for me for now. Thank you.
Topeka?
Okay, thank you. So I had a couple of thoughts to just do with the positioning of how we position the school and how we run an existing high school while this work is going on for the next 5 years. So I did a back of the envelope math, and just to point it out, say if you have 2,500 kids which go through the school system in the 5 years, and say if you have $20,000 a year that we spend on those kids, that's $50 million. So we are investing in the education of those many kids in the current high school while the new high school is being built. Now, I have complete confidence in Mr. Cronin and all the other people who help him in managing the construction vehicles and the materials, etc. But what he cannot manage is the noise, and he cannot manage all of that disruption that causes to a kid's education. So I'm a little concerned about when the new school building seems to be going up very, very close to the current high school. I don't know how you're going to manage that noise disruption for the 4 most crucial years of a child's education in our system. The other thing that I'm hopeful that people will think twice, thrice, multiple times is before they think about getting rid of our current field house. We have made some pretty major investments in getting the track redone after a lot of fits and starts. And that field house I know is really old, but if we could in any way do a quick and dirty survey of figuring out how much it would cost to keep it and how much it would cost to rebuild it. Like there is some hope over here that maybe we could build a full field house again. MSBA will not fund it. The town would have to fund it. So we have to think about how much we would be spending and how much we could save and maybe get another 20 years or whatever from the current field house. So those are my 2 big concerns I'm hoping will get addressed.
Mike, could you talk a little bit about the Hastings construction and how the noise was managed there? Because that was within, I think, a few feet of the existing school, right?
So, I don't want to paint the rosiest picture. I'm going to tell you that there's going to be occasions where noise transfers into the existing building. There's no question about it. There are trucks that run by. There are piles that are driven into the ground. There's steel that goes up. There are distractions, without a doubt. It's buildings. It happens in Boston. It happens in Newton, and happens in Lexington. What we try to do is work with the school to minimize the impact on some of the more significant events. We work with the principals to try to find out, tell us when the MCAS schedule is. We schedule what we refer to as quiet days during those windows. So on the days of testing that are significant to the school, they communicate that to us. We talk to the contractor and say, okay, today you can't do any real loud stuff, whatever that means, so that the school's not impacted. We try to maintain as little vibration that transfers to the school as possible. If there's work that needs to be done, like piles, we try to schedule that in a window where we're not doing academics, like the summertime. This will not be an easy effort, folks. I don't want to tell you all that they're not going to feel any vibrations or noises or smells or things like that. There will be some impact on the high school academic schedule. I'm going to be very, very truthful with you all. What we try to do is minimize it. And we're very communicative with the school principal. Louise was a terrific advocate for the students and the staff there. She was constantly meeting with us, and we constantly told her what the next steps on the schedules were. And we did as much academic structure around that as possible. But as Carolyn, who's on the screen here, can tell you, with a couple of kids in the building, we made noise there. We built within 6 feet of the building, 6 feet. We're nowhere near that in any of these scenarios. We're dozens, if not hundreds of feet away, but we were within 6 feet of a building, and we were able to make that happen. Carolyn, you may want to share some of the noise that your kids heard, but I know it happens. I don't want to tell you a false story. It will happen.
So Deepika, did you have a follow-up on that?
No, but I just wanted to clarify, Mr. Cronin, this is definitely not about you all. You all did the best you could in a very difficult situation. I'm asking the group over here to move the school away as far as possible that they can, and to keep the interests of the students that are currently going to be in the school system without, just only thinking about the future students that are coming there. You have to keep the current students' interest in mind. So just move it as far as you can.
And I think that information should all be shared when we go through the feasibility study with the folks that are part of the MSBA process with us. And as one of our main requirements, it might be that if we're going to build a separate building, that we build it as far away as possible while maintaining some of the other boundary requirements that we have, like that property line boundary or the Vinebrook culvert.
Rick? Rick, you may be on mute. We'll go to Susie.
Thank you, Jim. David Cantor asked some of my question, but I just wanted some questions about the laydown area. And I think Mike said he wanted it, to the left. So I'm thinking that's baseball, softball field and some of the Vinebrook culvert. Is it safe to put a laydown area on top of that culvert and to drive machinery on top of that? Do we have any sense of that?
So I don't have enough information as to what the culvert is. My expectation is, given that we're already driving over right now, that it would be, but we would do some kind of work to find out what's below, what's the structural integrity of the culvert, whether we have to put plates over on top of it as acting as a bridge, if you will. We would do those kind of things just to make sure that it's safe to go from left to right.
And then where do you envision parking is going to take place during this time, both for the school while it's in operation or for any workers that are working on the new building?
Terrific question, Susie. I think that's all going to get panned out as we get closer to what's the footprint look like. We'll park as many on site as we can, and then the rest of them. I've been involved with communities where we've rented a parking lot far away and they had a shuttle. Boston, there is no parking on sites in any of those properties where they do construction. So what they wind up doing is renting a site further away and they shuttle the folks in. Sometimes we put them in the streets. So we'll work with the school department, with the police, with the politicians to figure out what's the right solution for the neighborhood that's going to be impacted for a couple of years.
And am I incorrect in assuming, but you don't ever want to assume anything, that the parcel of land across the street from the high school, that backs up to Baskin Road, is off the table for anything? No, not over there, further down, across from the high school parking lot. It's a treed lot that the school department owns down, almost where the cursor just was, a little bit above that.
Sometimes it's
Where
easier.
the light blue box says 20,000 square feet
Yeah.
natatorium.
Right in there.
There is about a 3-acre property that's a triangular sliver that is below there. We believe it or not have already heard from the neighbor group that's above that has requested no trees get cut or anything gets removed from that space. So they've already voiced some opinion about that. But again, anything that the town owns is on the table as far as we'll bring options up to the group and we'll make a decision as a community and what's the right thing for us to do.
So options. to
Mike, I
which
just want to
group?
interject that was not a town, that was a town-wide group, not a neighborhood group.
Thank you.
Mike, when you say you're going to bring options to the group, what group are you bringing them to?
Well, as part of the MSBA, we would bring it to the SBC. And if there are other groups that are part of this decision-making body, whoever you want, Susie, if it's the select board, if it's the school committee, I think it's going to be a bigger group than just the SBC. You're going to need to have police involved in that because we're going to have parking on the street. That's going to be not normal to what we do today. So
Well,
I think it's going to be a big group.
And again, I'm just going to keep putting the plug in for recreation because they're going to also still, just like the schools are going to be trying to operate, a site to the right on that map. Recreation is still going to be trying to operate a site to the left unless all that land's going away. And I don't think that's still on the table, is it? We're not touching the track or the tennis courts or the pool.
No.
So I'll tell you, I don't have any interest in touching basketball courts or the Brando track. So if I was going to give the direction to the architect, I would hear from this group that those two parcels are off the table as far as any design components. And we tell the architect, stay off of that. We also tell them stay to the right of the Vinebrook area. So that means that we're not doing construction on the left, perhaps. But that doesn't mean we wouldn't use that space for lay down or parking or trailers.
You wouldn't use which space for lay down parking or
On
trailers?
on the left side of the Vinebrook. Jim, can you go back to that?
So you're saying
previous-
the baseball and the softball field only,
What do you mean by only, as opposed to what?
as opposed to encroaching on the playground or further up Park Drive onto the Little League field?
If it were me, I would say that the playground would be part of the whole scope of work as to what that would be reimagined and how that should be relayed out. I would put that as part of the scenarios we should be looking at as part of the evaluation of the whole site.
In terms of space to use, because the playground is on the rec capital plan for Melissa, jump in here. I think it's next year or the year after tops.
Right, we've talked about that. I'm aware of that,
And that's right up in here, this area here.
correct.
Okay, so this is another reason why I think it's important that these conversations include people from all these stakeholder groups. And I understand it adds another meeting, but I think that's just the layers of complexity that we have here in Lexington. And I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing. So again, I'm going to reiterate that I think, this group needs to continue. But we can say it's going to continue, but we also need to continue to meet. We can't say we're going to still exist and then no one's ever going to call a meeting for us. So I think there's two things there. We need to continue to be a group of stakeholders and we need to continue to meet. Thank you.
Melissa?
Yes, thank you. So you had pulled up the screen I was going to ask about with the potential spaces where the existing high school was for potential parking and or replacement of the active open space. And so I guess one question I have is, we looked at the property for what's protected and who owns what and what's possible for building, but I think it's going to be really important to understand on the other side where the high school currently is, what's possible for fields and what actually can be there with the wetlands and the timeline, because there's going to, we'll need to plan for that. And then, so can a diamond fit there? Is that the best location for, there's a lot of things that go into building the fields in terms of, even the direction of the sun and the parking and how close is it to the restrooms, and can we take down all those trees, and can we go and, put a field over the street? I mean, so I think that's going to be very important because it looks like you can fit a lot of things in there and we know what we can do with the building itself, but I'm not sure about the fields and lights and the things that would be removed from potentially the baseball field and the access roads and, really the connectivity of the park, which was part of the whole, the capital plan most recently when we did the track, was connecting all of these community spaces so that people could get through and about the park. So I think that needs to be considered when we're looking at the full feasibility, because then we'll know how much land we're going to be looking for to replace potentially at other places in town, and then to understand who's responsible for building those off-site spaces and determining where they go and which fields they are, because if they aren't able to be built here at 80 Worthing Road or, whatever, Waltham Street, whatever the street, the address is for this parcel, I think it's really important for all of us planning, financing, who's leading the charge to replace that, and how quickly are they replaced in terms of prioritizing it in the other capital projects. Because similar, I brought this up at one of our first meetings, our existing 5-year plan has the playground in it. That playground is going to be outdated. It's one of our 2 community parks. If we don't replace that, we're going to lose a playground at that park for many, many years. So those types of things I think still haven't been clarified in terms of the rec committee and as a department to move forward. So that was one thing is, identifying how we're going to continue to invest in the property. And then, similar, when the central office building didn't come down and that was supposed to be part of that project, we lost fields and it fell off the radar and the building never came down and we're in a deficiency for fields. So I think that it's going to be really important to understand where in the timeline the fields will be replaced and or built and how they're funded and who leads that, because it's going to take just as many years to facilitate the community groups, including the athletics programs, to find alternate spaces. And it's going to take creative thinking because there's not going to be many fields in the area that are going to be available for the price that these groups are paying to the town now compared to private organizations and institutions. So I feel that this group still has some value, and there's some really good, thoughtful community conversations that would be helpful for when this is brought to town meeting, because I am of the mind that we should all be on the same page in supporting the development of this and the success of this without it taking away from another stakeholder group, which doesn't necessarily mean recreation. And then lastly, I just would like to say that in terms of the building itself, the department and the community uses the building year round. So having a voice about how we utilize the field house and the gymnasiums and all the different things that we use in the building, it's more than just the fields. It's really, for me, it's a concern for how this department will operate with the loss of the building and or some of the spaces. And you all know, how our budget operates. So, I think that those are important pieces to this puzzle as well. Thank you.
I would assume that the plan, and Mike, correct me if I'm wrong, but that the recreation fields would just be part of the overall appropriation for building the high school, because it would be one component of the entire thing. And would be something that we would probably have to guarantee the legislature we're taking X fields and 10 acres, whatever it is, and displacing it and replacing it with these fields on these 10 acres. And so it would be in conjunction with the construction of the high school, but you're going to have a couple of years where those fields will not be available, because you can't be building on fields and tear down the old building and build new fields at the same time. So the new building will be built, and then after that is completed, then the old building will be demolished, and that land will be redeveloped into parking lots and recreation fields.
No, I understand that part, but I guess I'd have to look back at history to find out if the fields were part of the building over by central administration and where that fell off and where the money for that field went, because it never happened. And so I guess that's what my concern is, based on history, is that the fields weren't replaced. And that's why I think it's important to know what can go on this property for fields, given the restrictions, in addition to where else we can develop more, because that's going to take a whole lot of different conversations with neighborhoods that, we might to repurpose spaces. So it's just more things to consider as part of the conversation.
I'm puzzled because I'm not following why fields would go somewhere else in other neighborhoods if the land is available here.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I don't think we know what will fit here based on what's being, if the park doesn't have the practice field, the football field, and the baseball diamond, and then, can that really fit in those spaces given what parking will be needed and what, all of the different things. So I don't think that's clear yet, but
it has to be clear, because for us to take land out of Article 97, we have to put land back into Article 97 protection, the same amount, and it's got to be the same value land. That's what I was saying earlier. It can't be wetlands or unusable land. It's got to be the same quality land so that it can make up the same amount of fields. So that's why I'm not following, and that will dictate whether this is a 1-story, 2-story, or 4-story building, because we're going to have to do a couple of different things. We have to deal with the Article 97 issues that I was just mentioning. We have to fit the school and the size of the school onto the site. And we have to have the current school operating while the new school is being built. So I don't think that there's a likelihood that we're not going to take some of the wetlands and say this is some of the land that's going to be replacing a softball field. That just isn't going to happen. It wouldn't go through the legislature that way. Doug?
So just to follow up on Melissa's discussion, isn't it possible that we don't have enough land here to do the swap based on those issues of wetlands and so if we take away 3 soccer fields, making this up, but we only have space that's not wet for 2 soccer fields, where's the 3rd soccer field go? like what other town land are we swapping to do the swap? That's what I'm thinking. When she's saying these questions in my head, I'm thinking, okay, that land that we have currently with this high school would probably not be built today with our current conservation thoughts and how things would go, because there's a lot of wetlands right next to buildings. And so when you take that building down, theoretically, and you go try to put soccer fields up, I would assume there's going to be some resistance to what can go where. And it may squeeze us out because we can't add acreage to this entire property. So I think that's an open question for all of us. Like, where's the appropriate place for that to go?
Well, and again, I think that's what dictates the height of the building and how you make it fit on the site. I mean, this one shows the buildings further closer towards the existing buildings and not on the diamond over here. And so that would affect how this works. And I mean, that's what the designer is going to do. We're going to give them that direction. And that was the intent of this motion or recommendation to the school building committee that I had drafted, was to protect the recreation land, especially everything on the other side of the Vine Brook, including the playground, and to try to stay off of the existing recreation fields as much as possible. And that means permanently, not as laydown areas, so that those areas were either protected or restored at the end of the project. And that was the intent of that recommendation to the school building committee. But it sounds like we're not ready to do that we want to keep meeting and having more discussions about this, which is fine. But that was the intent of it. But we're going to continue having these discussions. And the real bottom line is, if there's somehow we decide we're going to build a one-story building, we're going to take up a whole bunch of space that's formerly recreation area, then the answer is either we take land somewhere else, we take land that abuts this property, and we restore recreation fields that way. I don't think anybody wants to go into land takings. And so we want to avoid that. Then I think the school design is going to be dictated by that, and the architect is going to have that direction. Mike?
I think this is a little bit about choices. If Jim, could you click off this?
Yep.
Or is that my screen? No, sorry, that was my screen. I had a reminder up there. The building that's currently there right now, the high school, is super inefficient in the way it's laid out. There is a huge footprint. And I think with all the input that we're receiving from the various community groups, as part of the check boxes for the architects that are going to go through this feasibility study, they're going to say, or the community is going to say, we want, 2 rectangle fields, a softball field and a baseball field at bare minimum on the new property when this whole thing is redesigned. And we want a school that has X number of square feet, which is determined by the number of classrooms and all of the gathering spaces. So once we have all those pieces together, oh, and by the way, we know that we've got some wetlands there that we're going to have to deal with, and we know that those exist. So there's no mystery behind that. The architect will take all of these pieces in, and they'll give us a whole bunch of choices. We'll then be able to look at them as a community and say, okay, we can put 4 fields back, have a 400,000 square foot building that's 4 stories in some spots, but it's mainly 2 and 1 stories. And in the end, everything kind of looks like it looks now. We've got some shared parking. Recreation is held whole. The school has a new location and everything is back to the way it was. Or we might say, we can get 5 fields on there, Melissa. And just because the way we relayed it out, it's more efficient and things are better. This is an option we can look at. We will be in regular communication with all of the different groups that are involved in this feasibility study. And I know that the groups are going to be tremendous in number and representation. That's part of the process. We want all that feedback. We're looking forward to it because it'll help make this product better and frankly faster if we're all involved with it from the very beginning. So we will take all of those components as part of the consideration in the feasibility study, folks.
Susie?
So before I get to my question, Mike, you made one comment that I just want to ask you a question about. You mentioned that in the feedback you've been getting from community groups about checkboxes, have you been having conversations with community groups? And if so, are you referencing this group here or other groups that you've been having conversations with?
I talk over myself on mute. I'm referencing previous processes that I've been involved in where the community will be involved. They'll say, we want the following things to take place as part of this site. At the Hastings, we said, we want a playground that's going to have X, Y, and Z in it. Those are a bunch of check boxes. We heard that we want to maintain the baseball field in the corner. That was a checkbox. We want to have a parking area to have X number of parking stalls, plus the ability for it to have solar ready, check, check, check. So as part of the feedback that we hear from all the different groups, we're building and kind of modeling this new building and all the pieces that will need to go into it. And that's kind of how we'll keep track with some of the information that we're looking for, just check boxes. Nothing, we haven't talked to anybody yet so far.
So nothing specific to this.
Zero.
Okay, that was confusing from the way you stated that. And then I just wanted to ask, these slides that you've been showing today, are these available to us as members of this working group?
Sure.
Or is especially the one you said that you showed earlier from engineering? I don't think we've seen that. I mean, we've seen it, but I don't think we've.
This one here. Yeah, this is, and you have to, it's not just that it's washed out on your screen, it's washed out on mine. You have to look at it carefully, but right along here is where the Vine Brook actually goes, and then it crosses the street right there.
I think after the meeting, if you could send those to us, that would be great. Thank you.
Sure, sure thing. So, so I get the general drift that a number of the people on this working group would like to continue meeting, which is fine. We really won't have a lot to react to until there is some feasibility plans done that show actuals, because I can forward these out to the group, but all Mike did was make big blocks out of 100,000 square foot squares in order to show what 400,000 square feet would look like in a 1, 2, 3 story, or even up to 4 story, I think, on one of them building. And so until the school building committee gets rolling along and we engage an architect to begin doing some feasibility design studies, I don't know that there will be a whole lot more that this group can do, because we've sort of hit a point where we need something new to react to. That's more of an actual type of plan. I mean, otherwise we just can sit here and regurgitate the same discussions, and I don't think that's very productive. So don't be surprised if there's several months lag between now and when our next meeting would occur, because I do think we have to have an architect involved, and then have some sort of, that person having enough time to start looking at the land and determining, you know, what the building configuration may be and where the recreation fields may go, for us to have a more accurate set of plans to begin reacting to. David?
Just for my own clarity, could someone remind me whether the school admin building and relocating it instead of the expense to try to repair that building to perhaps Bedford Street would have any bearing, potential bearing, for land availability to be quoted as replacement land?
Well, I think there's an opportunity to discuss that. I know that the select board wants to hold off on making a determination on what was going to happen with 173 Bedford Street until after we've moved further along in the police station project, and whether there were other town uses or whether the property was better used for affordable housing. There's also the opportunity, I know Dr. Hackett and I discussed this at one point in time, that an administrative office could also be moved or designed into the new high school as well. But that's the case in a number of communities.
Okay, it was primarily the question about land that is urgently needed to meet
Yeah.
the match with land that is not dedicated. So that was why I thought that other project might have some bearing now, whether the select board wishes to have it or not.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Susie?
Jim, so if I'm hearing what you're saying is that the school building committee is probably going to be meeting in the more near term than this group will be. Would it be possible when those meetings are posted that an email is sent to this group with the agenda so we're aware? I mean, I know we can all go check the meeting calendar, but so we're aware of when those meetings are happening
Sure.
and we can attend, because those all have to be posted open meetings. The other thing that just popped into my mind is perhaps we make this stakeholder group a subcommittee of the school building committee. So that there's still some connection to it there. It's just a thought.
Kathleen?
Yeah, just to add on to what Susie said about making the meetings, posting them. Obviously, they will be posted, but just super accessible to people. I know that I find it very helpful on the town website where you can sign up for notices of meetings. Like I've signed up, I get the select board agendas emailed to me, so I don't have to go to the town calendar to see when a meeting is posted.
Yeah.
I think it would be really great if there was an option for anyone to sign up for notifications of the school building committee's meeting, so they can, they'll get the agendas,
Yeah.
when it is happening.
That's a great idea, because then it'll happen automatically. And so Susie, does that address your?
I
that was
think
something
that would be an amazing solution to this, because it works not only for this group, but it works for the community.
Yeah.
Because we did, as I said at the top of my comments, we did say that these working group meetings were going to be open to the public, and this one was not posted. The last one, I know when we did the walk, I don't remember if that was posted, but there was one that was posted, and we had like 20 or 25 people in the audience. And the select board's been committed to that. This is going to be a transparent process, a long process, but a transparent process. Because as I've said, we all need to be on the same page here. It's a round table.
Okay. Kathleen, I don't know if you still have your hand up, but I'll call on Alan first.
No, I'm sorry, I forgot to take it down.
That's all right.
Hi, thanks for calling on me. I support the idea of this or some equivalent group continuing to meet, not necessarily for the next few months, though, as Jim says. I think Jim's on the right page there. I think the frequency should be determined later. But I think rather than having 20 of us trying to give input to this directly to the school building committee, it would be useful to have a forum to go over ideas and talk about things so that we reduce the traffic to the school building committee, and that the traffic, that the communication traffic that's given to them has been vetted to some extent, at least has gone through some discussion. And so I think the frequency and timing of meetings and how we meet and so on, who calls the meetings, something that maybe some of you want to think about. Frankly, I'll be frank about this meeting. A lot of it was discussion that was really taking the place of what should be done in the school building committee. And I thought it was a little premature to try to be going over those things. And, the school building committee is really going to have the authority to lead the discussion. So but on the other hand, as Susie says, all the stakeholders and everybody in town, this is going to need to be an all-inclusive process in order to get something to eventually pass a debt exclusion referendum. So I'm very sympathetic to the idea of continuing some group of stakeholders to give input to the school building committee. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so that's about an hour. Does anybody else have any other input at this point in time? On my list, I have that I will send out a copy of all these plans, and they go from this one here, which was one of the original plans. I think everybody probably has it, but I'll send it out again just with all of these plans so everybody has them all at once. This one is just the site in total. And then just a bunch of that we've looked at today, all of these different, and then the other plan that shows the Vinebrook. And I'll send out a reminder for everyone to look for the notifications to be on the school building committee, so they can click that off. And I'll make sure we send out another reminder once the page actually gets set up for that, because I don't think it's set up yet. I mean, it was just created last night. So, Pika.
Yeah, Mr. Malloy, just to maybe make your life a little easier, and the recreation department person had said that about land swaps. I was just looking back at some of the master planning compendium, the notes that were done by the master planning committee, and there is a section on land swaps in there. And so I know you said there might be nothing new for us to look at. This, we don't have to have a meeting about this, but if you just have a list of sort of town-owned land, school-owned land, any of that, if it's worthy of being turned into a field of any sort, you know, which doesn't have a building like the central office of it, that's an easy thing for everybody to know and say, yep, we have something that could be used, or nope, we don't have anything.
Yeah, I can tell you that I went through that exercise last year of looking at over 300 parcels that the town owns. And I don't know that we own any land that could be converted into fields without a lot of earthwork. There's parcel off Laconia that we own that's a big sloping parcel that has a lot of trails on it. I think we'd have a lot of neighborhood opposition. Doesn't have the best access, but it would require a lot of earthwork and a lot of retaining walls to make it flat. And so I think that would be a tough one. But other than that, I don't know that we have any parcels that are sizable enough to build a recreation area on. So I think it would be tough and expensive.
Well, we could see if somebody wants to donate land.
Yeah, right. I'm assuming with the value of real estate in Lexington, someone would have to be a very, very generous person. Melissa?
Thanks, Jim. I just want to share if people may remember, one of the outcomes from the Minuteman capital project not moving forward was to do an athletic feasibility study of the properties to see how we can maximize our own property. And that study is in the final draft and will be available probably in the next month or so. And although it wouldn't be replacing land, it would be an opportunity to look at the properties differently to at least replace the active recreation while we potentially look at where other land might be, you know, to take into our inventory. So that would be an opportunity to help minimize the impact for any loss, temporary or permanent, to some of the active spaces there. So that would be something to also include in any conversations just for that piece of it. It's not new property, it's looking at existing, but at least it would, you know, come at it from two different angles, I guess, rather than just waiting to find the replacement land and then develop it.
Doug?
Jim, where this group was set up sort of at the urging of, I think, our select board and, you know, some others. I know you're going into agenda setting probably 5 minutes ago.
No, we did it at 9 o'clock this morning.
Oh, well, I missed my opportunity then to put a plug in for, you know, I think Susie mentioned this, but it would be a good, I want to reiterate, it would be a good opportunity at our table to talk about where we see the recreation, you know, and other concerns about the land use voice being, you know, heard throughout this process. And I think that's really what this whole issue comes down to is, you know, we heard this last night at our select board meeting about sustainable issues. You know, where's that voice going to be heard? Where's the recreation voice going to be heard? I think this is such a big project. Everybody wants to make sure that they're heard. And on this call, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 people who are already on this committee, on the new committee. So you probably may not feel that same sense of, you know, your voice is going to be heard because you're part of the meetings. I just don't want to lose the folks on this call that are not part of that, feeling like they won't have a opportunity to speak. So I think it's important. I think the continuation of it in some form is important, but I do think our board should talk it through. Thank you.
Julie.
I go old school with my regular hand because I can never figure out that other thing. I want to say a few things. One is that, Melissa, I just want to tell you, speaking of being heard, that I heard what you were saying. And I think what I heard is, writing down some notes here, you were talking about the fact that you want, and I lost my place because I wasn't expecting to go. It sounded like you were saying, you know, here's what we can do. We want some assurances around what we can do and where things are going. And then the second part that I feel like got a little bit lost was, here's when and how we can do it. So what I was hearing you say was that history happened and things didn't progress. There were no guarantees, and how are we going to make sure that happens going forward? And I think that's really important and crucial to the work that we're going to do together. I also want to say that it seems like we do need to finish some unfinished business here. I would agree with that, especially after the conversation. And I feel like structure is a good thing in terms of the communication. So one of the things that worked well for us with the master planning committee, Alan was on it, Kathleen was on it, Mike, maybe other people. But anyway, what we tried to do is post the agenda, we'll post the meeting, post the agenda, have minutes after every meeting up and immediately available, include the video link to the meeting so people could view it and not feel left out. And then we had it at the same location all of the time. We're going into a discussion about school building, about building a new school. So I think that while we have everybody sort of here, I would like to say that I think the meeting should take place in the schools, in a place where we can broadcast the meetings regularly and consistently, put that information up, share it with everybody. All the stakeholders are involved. And I don't have any issue with what Jim's putting forward in terms of the ideas. I think we've captured what we hoped to. I think there was less process perhaps than, you know, some of us might have thought was going to happen. The essence of it is good, but there is a ton of stuff to work out. And I think this group, our purpose should be coming to as much agreement as humanly possible so that we can hand off the back of the napkin ideas to the architects and to the OPM, and they can take it and run with it. How nice would it be to have all those big questions that were asked today answered, and that we all could sort of be unified and say, yep, that's where we are, that's how we agree. So I hope that can happen too, and we can help, with that in any way that we can, or that you need us to. That's all.
Thanks. Any other comments? Okie doke. So I will save these documents, and I'm going to try to somehow on the PDF highlight the location of the Vinebrook in a different color so that it stands out better for everybody before I send it out. So I'll try to get that out before the end of the day today. And then if anybody has any comments or questions in the interim, don't hesitate to reach out. We obviously haven't even scheduled the school building committee yet, but we'll talk to Mike and Julie about that, and we'll try to get that organized so that that group can start meeting, because and we probably need to wait until we get the approval of the school building committee from MSBA. We sent in the letter today, and they sent in a response saying they've received it, and they'll send it to the legal department to review, and we'll get back to us. So
oh, Jim, just one more quick thing, because it's a follow-on from our last meeting. Going back to 173 Bedford, I think that we really should just underscore the point you made earlier, where there's an interest in housing for the town. Susie brought it up last time, I think, and a few people have expressed interest. I do think we should think about, what would it look like to move central offices to the high school site? That's something, Mike, that we could talk about with the architects and say, let's just get a sense of how much space we need, how much additional that would cost, because they won't fund the office spaces, as we know. But it would solve a lot of problems, and then that would get the people who are interested in public housing what they need, space here, fields here for Melissa to run with. Hopefully everybody would win.
And clearly in new construction, if you're adding that in, the cost of that additional square footage is probably pennies on the dollar. If you're building brand new, or you're renovating another location or something, or renovating the location that you're in right now, which needs substantial work. So I think it would be a lot more expensive to renovate where you are now than it would be to build that space using a space needs analysis on how much space you really need to build it into the high school.
Although look how cute it is. It's very cute here. We're really comfortable. So we're good either way, but yeah. I think
Great. All right. Then we'll, I'll send this stuff out today, and once we get the other committee organized, we're somewhere down the road, and it, in all likelihood, Mike, I'm assuming it'll be sometime in 2023 before we have any kind of plans for this committee to react to.
Oh, plans, right. I mean, we got design a selection process to happen sometime in the first half of 2023.
And it takes, you have to go through the MSBA to do that. When we select our designer, it's not just us selecting a designer. We have to go through the process, and then the designers get interviewed by a panel at MSBA, plus some of us local officials. Normally, when I've done that before, it's been the superintendent, myself, and somebody like in Mike's position serve as the voting members of the community, and then MSBA has 12 votes or 13 votes, whatever it is. So, but I don't know about Julie or Mike, but I haven't had a situation where the MSBA overrode the local choice. So
We typically like to listen to the community that's impacted.
But can I offer this as well? Because it sounds like we may or may not be meeting again with this group. The questions that were raised are relevant to our master planning endeavor on the school side. So if it doesn't happen in this Article 97 working group, I've taken good minutes. We can engage our master planning committee and then try to answer some of these questions as well. So that's another outlet.
All right.
And I think Alan, seems logical, doesn't it, given the work that we've done so far? You can't say no. You can if you want.
I can't say no.
Okay, Mike, does that seem reasonable?
Mhm.
Okay. Oh, Kathleen, I left you out, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, that's fine. That's good.
Susie?
Excuse me, Julie, just curious, is there a recreation representative as part of that master planning group?
No, and while you were speaking and Melissa was speaking, I'm thinking that was that was an oversight. And that group's work started about 4 years ago. So we can easily pull one in. And if you want to take it to your group and add that individual in, or Melissa, you want to do it, or have Rick or whomever, that would be great.
Thank you for that invitation.
Right. Well, you will hear from me before the end of the day. You'll get an email from me, and then sometime after we get the other process moving along, you'll hear from me again on this. Okay. All right, everybody, have a great week. Stay cool.
Thank you.
See you later.
Thanks a lot.